with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Wednesday, July 27th, 2022. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Daniel Jurado, organizer with the Kickstarter United Union. Also joining us, Vincent Vertuccio, climate organizer with Now or Never, on the direct action that's going to take place during or before, or we're not quite sure, the Congressional Baseball Game. Also on the program today, Pelosi's potential visit to Taiwan, needlessly risking brinksmanship. DOJ's January 6th investigation apparently involves Trump's role. Semiconductor, free billions of dollars of subsidy bill looks to get easy passage in the Senate. Meanwhile, Democrats introduce a House bill to enact term limits for the Supreme Court. New poll, 75% of Dems go ABB. Anybody but Biden for 2024. Meanwhile, Democrats look to have the Department of Homeland Security IG recuse himself from the Secret Service investigation because apparently he knew they had destroyed text messages months and months ago. Republicans are getting nervous about a potential same-sex marriage bill in the Senate, even though they see no reason for it. Weird. Kemp and Warnock with slim leads in Georgia. Congressional staffers get arrested in a climate protest in Chuck Schumer's office. Texas challenges the ACA requirements for STD and HIV screening as a violation of religious freedom for the bosses. U.S. providing medical treatment now to wounded Ukrainian soldiers at a U.S. base in Germany. And lastly, a new report. Black life expectancy is lower in southern U.S. counties where slavery was most dense in 1860. That is a 150-plus year legacy that is impacting black life expectancy. And in those same counties, white life expectancy is actually higher. Not just than black people, but than your average white person. All this and more on today's Majority Report. That study, incidentally, is fascinating. Yeah. When you talk about it is hump day.
Yes.
And I must introduce the person who coined that phrase.
Yep. Hello.
Yeah,
how are you? It's me, Emma.
Do you ever get, Emma Vigeland, do you ever get any type of royalties from that?
I don't. I mean, I don't know if we can announce this, but there might be some merch coming with my name on it.
Whoa. Oh, that's right. Oh, yeah, it's en route. Yeah, well, let's just tease that.
Okay. Yeah, we'll tease it.
As soon as I say royalties, is that the first thing?
That's the thing. The first thing that came to my mind.
Enough.
Yeah.
That's okay.
I would like peace.
I understand. Yes.
Damn, I just looked down at my desk and I realized I forgot my full coffee at home. So this might be a rough show.
Oh boy. All right.
Okay.
Well,
but it's hump day.
It's hump day. Just so modest about coining the phrase hump day, which most folks had never heard of before she introduced it. So There you go, ladies and gentlemen. We call it Hump Day, and that's because we're in the middle of the week.
Yeah,
Right.
you're right. It's just so people understand. It's because there's 7 days in a week, and there's 5 days in a work week, and this is the middle day of those days.
Right. Almost like a camel's hump, and you're getting over the hump. I mean, there's so many different ways to use it. I'm so impressed.
Of all the bits that we've done on this show, I'm just so surprised that this is the one that we've stuck with.
I like getting emails about it.
Yeah,
Okay.
It's the same reason it starts it with the heartland of America that confuses about 50% of the audience as well.
Exactly. Exactly. I like getting emails. Like, I heard Hump Day before Emma was born.
Do you realize that Brooklyn is not the heartland of America?
I contest that. I mean, it's not the heartland per se. Metaphorically speaking, I think it's arguably the heartland.
It's where your heart lands. Jesus
Boy.
Christ.
But that life expectancy report is, like I say, is fascinating. The idea that 150 some odd years later, because this is measured between 2016 and 2018, life expectancy was lower for black people in counties where, in southern U.S. counties, obviously, that is where we had the highest density of slavery. And highest density of slavery basically means how many slaves were there relative to slave owners. And we've interviewed authors in the past who have found data where you can predict election outcomes based on that density. Years later. This is a study that came out of the University of Texas out of Austin. The study controlled for other factors affecting life expectancy, such as household income, poverty, access to health care, and occupational hazards. Almost 30 such factors were accounted for in the research by Robert Reese. He says, to be clear, this effect goes beyond income or poverty. This isn't just poverty or lack of health care under a different name. White life expectancy in such counties was higher than in others during the same period, suggesting that the legacy of slavery also functions to lengthen life expectancies of white people in former slave states. There is a strong negative correlation between the number of enslaved people in a county in 1860 and black life expectancy today. The reverse is true for white people. Theirs is a positive correlation, meaning white people who live in places where there were more slaves tend to have longer life expectancies. Nobody's quite sure as to why, right? This is a correlation, and nobody's quite sure as to why. Reese suggests in his report that slavery may affect contemporary outcomes because behaviors and priorities established pre-1865 remain entrenched in local communities. He suggests that the history of slavery in southern counties may have made black people also, this could be another explanation, people wary of the type of treatment they may receive from white healthcare providers who sought to minimize the healthcare concerns of black people. In response to this wariness, black people in counties with stronger legacy of slavery may or may not may be more likely to avoid healthcare services. And that same legacy of slavery may prioritize white health outcomes. And, you know, this could be a function in some ways of the way that the towns are structured relative to train tracks or power plants or dumps or whatever it is. But it's fascinating.
Like all those things seem plausible as factors in it. Like I've read William Byrd, the slave master in Virginia's diary, and a lot of their work was actually experimenting on their slaves, different types of cures and stuff like that, pretty brutally. And you know, one thing that hasn't changed is there's a class structure based on race that hasn't been that was never uprooted following the Civil War.
Right.
Probably the highest correlation to health outcomes is class, right? So that would make sense.
But it does control for income.
Wow. Okay.
And so it's hard to say. it is hard to say what causes this. All right. Moving along here, Donald Trump was delivering what Emma has dubbed maybe his first real campaign.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if it's any different than others, but he is back in Washington, D.C. for the first time since he ran away with his tail between his legs. And
Burgers on the wall.
What's that?
Ketchup
And the
on
hamburgers
the wall.
on the wall.
Yeah. The patty just slipping down the side of the White House.
Yesterday, we talked about Schedule F, which is the plan for the Republicans. It is a Republican plan to, now that they have essentially worked out a mechanism to convert tens of thousands of U.S. government workers from civil service to at-will hiring. They plan to come in, fire. They have a list of 50,000 people they want out, positions they want out. Fire these people, replace them with, Republican operatives, essentially. Here is Donald Trump touting that.
And it is a great shame of the Pentagon brass that they have not spoken out in defense of their own service members. They have to speak out. To drain the swamp and root out the deep state, we need to make it much easier to fire rogue bureaucrats who are deliberately undermining democracy, or at a minimum, just want to keep their jobs. They want to hold on to their jobs. Congress should pass historic reforms empowering the president to ensure that any bureaucrat who is corrupt, incompetent, or unnecessary for the job can be told, did you ever hear this? You're fired. Get out. You're fired. Have to do it. Deep state. Washington will be an entirely different place. Our current appeals process, as an example for these rogue bureaucrats, has 3 stages which take, on average, 5 years per stage. In other words, to fire someone who is doing a bad job, if the government wins, will take 15 years under our current system. Think of that. 15 years. Almost all politicians will be long gone before that process even ends.
Well, I wish they were all long gone before that process ends. But the fact is that they're out there pitching this. And we were working through this. This has been a long-time Republican goal that has gotten more aggressive over the years in terms of the deconstruction of the administrative state. Steve Bannon announced it, full-throatedly. But recall that, even Rick Perry back in the day was, there were 5 agencies that I would get rid of on day one.
I mean, Betsy DeVos the other day said that they should basically dismantle the entire Department of Education.
Right. And then the way that they will deconstruct the administrative state is to put only political apparatchiks in there, as opposed to professionals who do this job and understand what this is. It sort of came to me the other night, last night, as a slight epiphany. It may not be quite so profound. I think a lot of people understand this already, but it just, I've talked a lot about the assault that the Republicans have made on the administrative state over the past 20 years, but understand where that leads. When you have, the administrative state exists for essentially one reason, and that is to curb the power of corporations, to protect citizens. And who are they protecting them from? They're not protecting them from aliens. They're protecting them essentially from corporations. OSHA, EPA, FDA, USDA. I mean, the vast majority of the functioning of the administrative state is to essentially protect the people from corporations so that they can't offload essentially their costs onto society so that they can pursue profit. So that it's expensive to get rid of this toxic byproduct of this product that we make. Oh, it costs $100 a barrel to get rid of it, or we could just pour it into the river for $5. And the cost is then passed on to society. People get sick. They get cancer. They die. These are all costs that are associated that get on with society. That's what the administrative state does. So once you get rid of that, and to the extent that the government exists at all, it is to basically subsidize corporations. maybe choose one or two that they really like. And that is Umberto Eco's definition of fascism, that melding of the state and the corporation. And with the absence of the administrative regulatory state, there really not much else that government does. We'll do Social Security, we'll do Medicare. Still, again, understand that they will go after those things too, both at an administrative level. And all that you get rid of the part where it inhibits corporations, then you're just basically having them provide a glide path for corporations.
Well, you talk about like Peter Thiel and his muse Curtis Yarvin. They have an acronym: Retire All Government Employees RAGE. And Peter Thiel is somebody who is literally a government contractor for like law enforcement intelligence with, I forget the name of that company. Palantir, yeah. So he doesn't mean like those sorts of government services. He means what you're saying is the stuff that restricts his types of corporations from doing whatever they want.
He wants to remove the guardrails so that it says melded in with the, whatever right-wing leader, most likely Trump, gets back in office. So there's as few guardrails as possible between those two things. Yep. He also in this speech, just to be noted, and maybe we'll play a clip later, talked about how we need to prosecute drug dealers, lots of just Duterte-esque kind of traditional fascist talk. But, again, he's funny to make fun of. I think so. But this is just a reminder of what the actual consequences will be when he very likely runs again, because this felt like a trial balloon.
We're going to be talking to Daniel Jurado in just a moment. Word from our sponsor today, one of those sponsors, ZBiotics. ZBiotics is a probiotic drink that breaks down the byproduct of alcohol in your gut. And I know there's this, I always was under the impression that, it was the dehydration that made you feel the worst after a night of drinking. And certainly you get dehydrated and you should stay hydrated. But apparently it is a byproduct of alcohol that when in your gut, it gives you essentially, hangover, rough morning, whatever you want to call it. And there is a way that we have found here at the office to avoid that. All you do is you drink one bottle of ZBiotics. It's like this. It's like a shot. And you do that before you drink your first drink of alcohol. It's all you need. Doesn't matter how many drinks you're planning on having. You drink responsibly, of course. You pace yourself. Try and get a good night's sleep. And then the next day, you feel like you didn't go out drinking last night.
I could have used this last night because I had two drinks and I had 2 old fashions because I've been watching Mad Men for the 4th time and I'm into it now.
It is impossible to watch that show and then not immediately start reaching for whiskey.
I went to dinner with my friends. I had 2 drinks and then this morning I was like, damn, I'm getting old.
Yeah. Tell me about it. I mean, that's the thing is that it really doesn't take much for me to feel a deficit the next day. And I've got to get more of this because I went through all 4 or 5 that I didn't give you guys. ZBiotics produces an enzyme that it's like the one that your liver uses. It breaks down this byproduct in your gut. ZBiotics is the first genetically engineered probiotic. It is created by altering the DNA of a natural probiotic bacteria we eat all the time. ZBiotics is not vitamins. It is not plant extracts. There's no off-the-shelf ingredients. ZBiotics has been rigorously tested and is FDA compliant for safety. If you're the kind of person who enjoys a drink with a friend, or maybe you have one, I used to occasionally would have like one a night, sitting watching TV, waiting for my kids to go to sleep. But if you want tomorrow to be a productive one, you want to do your workout, you want to be able to come in and do your 3-hour show, ZBiotics is perfect for you. You can get 15% off your first order of ZBiotics pre-alcohol probiotic. Go to zbiotics.com/majority. Use the code majority. That's the letter Z, BIOTICS. zbiotics.com/majority. Coupon code majority at checkout saves you 15%. We'll put a link in the YouTube and the podcast description. Just quickly, email from a listener, longtime listener here. Want to give you a heads up about an event I'm hosting at Daughter in Crown Heights, Thursday evening from 7 to 10. It's a night of creative improvisation. So basically, they give out a creative prompt. People can respond by drawing or writing or painting or etc. And then they show their work to the group. Sounds like fun. There'll be lots of wine. So check it out. They're raising money for 826 NYC at that thing. We need to take a quick break. And then when we come back, we'll be talking to Daniel Jurado, organizer with the Kickstarter Union. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigland on the Majority Report. Joining us is Daniel Jurado. He's an organizer with Kickstarter United. Dannel, welcome to the program. I'm here with Emma Vigland.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Dannel, let's just give us a sense of how the size of Kickstarter before we go into how you guys got a union.
Yeah, absolutely. This one truly always surprises people. We're about 90 people, and I don't think we've ever exceeded 140 people in the company overall. So we're much smaller than most people think we are.
And you were just telling us where you're located, and this change was important because one of the things I know that you guys negotiated was this concept of working remote. So tell us about this.
Yeah, absolutely. So the smallest bit of context here is that we finished organizing in February of 2020, which, as most people now with hindsight being what it is, understand it to be, just in the nick of time, right? So I think that that's kind of very important for establishing this. March 2020, we all go remote. And so being able to tech companies are some of the most remote enabled work that's in just out there in the world today, right? And so being able to continue to be remote, even if we do decide to open an office again, was very important to our bargaining unit. So that was one of the things that we identified as a priority, and we said, hey, we really like this. It is difficult at times for some people, and if the company does decide to reopen an office, we still want to make it an option for people to just say, okay, cool, hey, you're coming in because we need you to come in for whatever reason, but it won't be a thing that's compulsory. As you might be seeing, some tech companies now have they've done their whole return to work advertisement spiel, right? And you've seen all of those companies be like, oh, well, if you don't move back, we're going to fire you. And we're just like, we don't want that to be the case. We want it to be, hey, you can do your job from just about anywhere in the United States that we can hire people in. So if that's the case, continue doing your job, and that was pretty important for everyone.
What were some of the reasonings that they tried to give you for the return to office push? I mean, they're obviously BS, but I'm just curious what they even tried.
Yeah, sorry, I maybe it was unclear here. We Kickstarter management or leadership has not had a return to office push. In fact, they did just the opposite. They decided to close our office, so our physical office is no longer a thing. And so this was more of a prevention measure and less of a reactionary measure, if that makes sense.
Gotcha.
So okay, so I just want to get a sense of where you were in February. That was when you decided to make the push for a union, or is that when the union was established?
No, that was about almost a year. It was almost a year after we announced that we would start to make a push for the union, and so February was when we won our union vote.
Okay, and not coincidentally, we had a more, I think, amenable a National Labor Relations Board by that point.
Yes, that is absolutely a very keen observation. I think that it would have been a very different environment if the Trump NLRB had remained in standing during that time.
Why?
We tried to, because Republicans are very anti-labor, of course. The NLRB, this is something that people don't really clock a lot. The National Labor Relations Board is an appointed position. So the head of the NLRB is an appointed position. And so as a result, it comes and goes with whatever president or party swing may be in power at the time, right? So, for example, we had people who were fired unjustly, and some of those people waited to contest their charges based on like how favorable it would be. This is just a little bit of our history, I guess. But some people won that thing, some people didn't win that thing, and it just depended on whether they stuck towards it whether they had a more favorable NLRB in their favor to rule in that case.
Okay, so if I understand what you're saying is that you had multiple people who were fired unjustly as probably as some type of retribution for organizing, right?
Yep.
And some filed their grievance with the National Labor Relations Board while there was still a majority of Trump appointees, and some waited until the National Labor Relations Board was a majority of Biden appointees, and there were different outcomes. Is that what you're saying, or no?
So no, I think it is. I think it was a situation of circumstance and less of a strategy. But I do think that that's how it turned out.
Okay.
It was more, you have to file the labor charges within a certain period of them happening, and so these two people were fired around the same time. However, deciding to stick with it or drop the case is up to the person who filed it. And so the person who stuck with it was able to eventually win that case in the Biden administration times. And the person who dropped it just didn't really see a path forward for that kind of thing.
Okay, and so does that provide some type of like larger value outside of that individual, but does it strengthen the hand of the union to signify to management that there's a more sympathetic apparatus to enforce basic rules on the way that you treat unionizing employees?
Oh, that's a great question. You know what? I don't think I've ever thought about it in that sense. I think a lot of the times with those NLRB cases, especially for fired employees, the goal of the most positive outcome is they don't fire employees for organizing again, of course. And I don't think we'll ever see that again, especially now that we're a formal union. But B, that employee or former employee gets whatever rewards or merits, right? So like if that's lost wages, if that's putting their job back into place, like there's all sorts of stuff that they could be rewarded. So
let's talk about, I'm curious about the idea of, so now your company in particular has gone from in a physical place to now where you're all sort of like in your own homes or your own, home offices or whatever it is that you work out to work out your situation. From an organizing standpoint, you guys don't have to organize now because you already have the union. But what do you think that dynamic is going to make it a little bit harder for tech people, or is it that you guys generally are just so comfortable like building relationships on Slack or out, or whatever, app it is that's not as relevant? Because I just, I wonder if there's an analog to the idea of like, they're not being, it's tough to organize, let's say, Uber drivers because they never come in contact with each other. But I guess that's different when you're working remotely but you tell me.
Yeah. I think that it is, if you had asked me this question in the beginning of the pandemic in 2020, I think that it would be a bit of a more uphill battle. 2 years into working remotely for many companies, I think that there's a better established cadence and rapport digitally / online for a lot of people. So building those relationships might be a little bit easier if they weren't previously, right? At the same time, I do think that having this puts people on like an equal playing field in terms of like, I can reach anyone, like I don't have to specifically work in the same office as that person, or I don't have to be in that same locality to be able to talk to that person. So it's nice that I would have been able to have an organizing conversation with a coworker in California as easily as I would have been able to have an organizing conversation with a coworker in Michigan, right? Like that's just a Zoom call away. Now there's some like really interesting difficult pieces around that, and that's largely regarding a decision that NLRB made, I think in like late 2019 or 2018, about using company property for organizing and union activity. And so that is on its own, it's very interesting because first of all, it's an NLRB decision during the Trump administration, which can we just throw them all out? Like that'd be great. But the thing that makes it difficult is that since all of this is company property, then they can snoop on that thing, right? And so Slack is pretty good about their overall digital privacy stuff, but a Slack administrator technically can still do most of what they want. There's some weird asterisks that I won't go into there, but essentially like don't consider conversations on your company Slack to always be private. But I think also people are more aware of this, especially after going to many of the things like protests and stuff where we're just like, oh, hey, what's your signal? Or can I get you to another group chat that is a little bit more secure so that we can talk about organizing stuff, right? I think people are more savvy about those things. I wouldn't say everybody, but I do think that people are starting to think about this more just in light of society, American society as a whole, and maybe a little less specifically to organizing, but right. It's there. It's in the back of our minds.
So, have you guys gotten calls from other similarly situated, digital companies to figure out how to best organize and unionize? And if so, why don't you tell us broadly, to the extent that you can, what you tell them, so that if there are people out there who are thinking about doing their own companies, they have an idea of what to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So sometime in, I want to say 2020, we established the Tech Workers Union. So that is as part of OPIU. As part of OPIU's organizing efforts in the tech industry, there is now the Tech Workers Union Local 1010, and that has helped organize now 3 or 4 different unions within the tech sector, sort of in the in-betweens of like tech sector nonprofit is kind of what that happened. And if I think about this a lot because I've talked to just about every union that has organized there. I've talked to the New York Times Tech Guild folks as well. I've talked to a lot of people who are organizing in this space. And the thing that I think about, and like my biggest piece of advice is, a union is not an emergency switch that you pull. It is not like the safety parachute. A union is making sure that you don't have to jump out of the plane in the first place, right? And I think that that's very important to keep in mind, because you can't just say, there's going to be layoffs, we need a union now, you know, like that's not how quickly unions form. And so can unions respond to layoffs? Of course they can, right? But they had to have been formed, they had to have been established, they had to have talked about or even negotiated any sort of like layoff provisions, right? So I think that's what's really important. And I would love to see the whole, I mean, the reason we did this is to see the whole tech sector organized, right? I think that that's very important. I think we're going to have some really interesting up and coming things regarding a lot of the AI stuff that the Google researchers have been fired for, and situations like that. I think we're going to have, I fully expect us to have a larger conversation about offshoring jobs for tech unions as well. Just in terms of like contract work, it's very standard in the industry. But as a result, like I think that we've lost a lot of the maybe this feels like a throwback to older unions, but we've lost a lot of the protections of, well, they can't just move our job anywhere. It's like, it's a digital job. They literally can move it anywhere, right?
Right. So, I mean, you guys are all remote as it is now. There's no people can't assess your efficacy because you're 5 miles away from where the office used to be versus 50 or 500 or 5,000 for that matter. So what was going on that you guys, like, you know, when you think about the union that you now have and the union you did not have 2.5 years ago, let's say, or 3 years ago, what's like materially different for you as a worker and for your other workers?
Yeah, absolutely. A thing I think about is there were many processes which were opaque to the workers. When you report somebody for sexual harassment, when you have a dispute about unequal treatment and you say like, hey, like I worked 8 hours overtime, that person worked 8 hours overtime, why did that person get off the next day but I did not, right? Like, and so when you bring up a bunch of that stuff, and then when you boil it down, it comes down to representation. Like we now have not a lawyer, we now have a coworker in the room with us when something negative can happen, right? We now have an experienced union advocate who says like, no, they can't do that. It's against the terms of your contract that we've signed, right? So that's, to me, the material difference is we are now able to say, hey, like there's unequal treatment here. Why was this done? And then we can file a grievance regarding it. Knock on wood, thankfully, we haven't had to do that, but grievances are part of the way of enforcing a contract. So if we file no grievances, that's also a very different conversation and a concern to have. But I think that, I'll stop there.
Well, and so in other words, that's why we hear so many people who are concerned about all the wokeness at various tech companies. That's why they promote the unionization so much of these companies, because that way, because that is the whole point of their complaints. I mean,
the last guard against wokeness.
Right. In an alternate universe, they would actually suggest unionization. That is just something for people to note.
Yeah.
So, and how did like management deal with that? Was it an easy go at it, or did they finally sort of relent? And do you feel like disconnected from the soul of Kickstarter because of the interlopers that supposedly were the
third
union?
Party?
Wow. I'm trying to. So, how did management feel about that? I cannot speak for management. They certainly made us fight quite a bit of an uphill battle in terms of our contract, in terms of our organizing. So I think that, and again, this is in the past, but I think that their actions spoke for what they thought about it. just in terms of like, why would you fight a union, right? Like we've all heard the terrible union joke everywhere. It's just like of the CEO sitting down in front of all of the staff and saying, well, I'm for unions, but not here. I'm a good CEO,
right?
And so I think that's kind of a lot of the BS that you hear all the time about that kind of stuff. So that happened. They didn't make it an easy contract battle, and I think that is they hired a pretty top union busting firm to be like the opposing legal counsel. So big surprise, not really, but we were ready for it. They've thrown worse at us. And so how I feel about the third party, I have never thought of them as a third party. Our union is largely composed by the workers that are at Kickstarter. We occasionally have 2 or 3 reps who help us with the organizational logistics things. This is a twofold help in the sense that we're workers. We're still working and doing our day jobs. So it's nice to have someone to just keep you on task in terms of like, hey, like this is what needs to happen for us to move to the next step of contract bargaining, of organizing, of steward elections, of all of that stuff, right? So it's nice to have that administrative logistical support. At the same time, they have such a deep well of experience with unions and with companies and with adversarial companies and stuff like that, where if we encounter something, we can be like, hey, we think this is kind of weird, this kind of smells, or they could see a situation and be like, hey, this one kind of sucks, like they're putting this person on like an employee like performance review for no reason other than they might not like this person, right? Like, and so we say, okay, cool, like what are the concrete ways that's a thing that's happening? And that to me is the most invaluable piece. I don't think that anyone in this the third party that we talk about, right? I don't think anyone in this third party has ever stepped and been like, no, we're the representation. It's always with the consult of our workers, right? Of our bargaining unit, and saying like, hey, like, what do y'all want to do about this? Like what is your concern for bargaining this contract? What is your concern for dealing with this situation? And yeah, it's never felt like a third party. It's always felt like it's our concerns first, and they provide the advice, and they provide a lot of our logistical support.
Well, Daniel Jurado, organizer with Kickstarter United, been really interesting to hear this story. How can people get in touch with you if they have questions about maybe unionizing their own workplace? Yeah, absolutely. I didn't even think about this far. I think contact at Kickstarter United. If you go to kickstarterunited.com, there should be a contact email. We'll put a link to it, and you can work it out with Bradley, and we'll put that in the YouTube description and the podcast description. Awesome. Cool. Dannel, thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Do we need to take a quick break? We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be talking to Vincent Vertuccio. He is the climate organizer with Now or Never. Be right back. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report. Joining us now, Vincent Vertuccio. He is a climate organizer with Now or Never. Vincent, thanks for joining us.
Of course, happy to be on.
Now or Never. What I mean, I know what that means, but tell us about the organization.
So Now or Never is somewhat of a temporary housing for a coalition of organizations and community leaders from across the country who are coming together to take action, to demand bold action on the climate crisis. So it's groups like Shut Down DC, Arm in Arm DC, West Virginia Rising, a church, all sorts of groups and states across the country who are coming together and convening the first action at the Congressional Baseball Game to shut it down to demand that climate action. So it's a really broad coalition. It's a temporary structure to sort of bring together this big group of folks around a common goal.
And is this a one-off for Now or Never, or is it like one of those things like we'll see? But we've come together to do this one action, and then we'll see, how it goes. Or what's the idea in terms of how durable this coalition is?
Yeah, so this particular action is the start of what is right now a potential 3-action arc. So this is the first escalation, and the second one is poised to be in various swing states and places where the community leaders who are coming into DC to support this action hail from. And the third is a yet to be sort of determined further escalation. And it's all based on, is Congress, is the president going to start responding to the climate crisis like they should be? Are they going to start taking climate action like they should be? Is he going to declare a climate emergency? Is Congress going to pass climate policy through reconciliation? If that happens, I don't think the escalation will continue. But the arc is basically built to respond to what might be continued inaction from Congress and the president.
Why did you choose the Congressional Baseball Game? Is it because it's almost comical for members of Congress to be playing a game and patting themselves on the back about how bipartisan they are together as the planet literally burns?
Well, you took all the words right out of my mouth. Yeah, that is exactly why we chose to target the baseball game, because it is such like a searing indictment of Congress that while the planet is literally on fire, they are quite literally playing games. And not to overuse baseball metaphors, but Democrats need to play hardball on climate, and we're gonna leave it all on the field to make sure that happens, because we are in a dire moment. And you put it better than I can that like Congress is not taking this crisis seriously, and members of Congress are, more eager to commentate on the relative strengths and weaknesses of climate activism and their tactics than actually address the climate crisis. And climate inaction is no different than climate denial. So yeah, it is like a real example of like that Washington backslapping. Everything's better when it's bipartisan. It doesn't matter that the person who sits next to me is a fascist. He's a great pitcher. Like that, it's just that type of attitude that really is part of the reason why we are in the moment we're in. I mean, the separation of BIF from Build Back Better, and that's the bipartisan infrastructure framework, was one of the biggest blunders in a long time. And it's part of the reason why we didn't see climate action yet so far in reconciliation. And it's directly a product of this we need everything to be bipartisan attitude, not to go off on a rant. But this event really does symbolize a lot of the problems of, Democratic Party leadership, and a lot of the problems with, Joe Manchin and the Republicans. BP and other fossil fuel companies are literally sponsoring the event. And you walk in and lobbyists for defense contractors hand you baseball cards with the congressmen who are playing on the baseball cards. It's all a big joke, and it's a big game to these people. And these people really do have our lives in their hands.
I'm sorry. BP is one of the key sponsors for this baseball game?
Chevron as well.
Oh,
well, at least they're inclusive.
All right. So what's the theory of change here? In other words, like, for folks who aren't familiar with that term, like map this out for me. Obviously, one protest at a baseball game is not going to, but what is, like, when you say that, when you sit down and you say, we're going to form this coalition, we're going to get a bunch of groups, we're going to go do this. Like, why? Like, what do we hope? I mean, in a perfect world, like how does this work? What are you guys thinking? Like, what is the theory of change?
Well, I mean, it is probably too negative to say, but this is a moment of like almost desperation, right? I mean, the window to take climate action is like perilously close to closing. And a lot of the more traditional tactics have just completely failed us. I mean, we keep hearing like, oh, this isn't the way it's meant to be done. This is uncivil, this or that. But all of the traditional Washington ways of putting pressure on leaders or lobbying for your cause have failed. They have objectively failed to achieve climate action. So, it is come to us that like as our generation, as like a Gen Z person, is going to have to deal with the effects of this. And in general, like our backs are against the wall. And the only option left is escalated, nonviolent, direct action, doing everything we possibly can to turn the temperature up, to put the pressure on our leaders to do something. Because we really just have no choice but to do this, because we've used all other options, all the other options that are more friendly to members of Congress and that folks love to talk about as the civil democratic thing to do. Those have been used, those have been exhausted, and nothing has stopped inaction. I mean, we just cannot let the Democratic Party and bow down to Joe Manchin and the Republicans and let them burn our future for profit. And this is our way of making that clear.
Is there any strategy to like directly impact, I don't know, Schumer, or directly impact Manchin? And we just had half a dozen congressional staffers get arrested in Chuck Schumer's office yesterday. These are staffers from like, I think Bowman's office. I had a list here. A couple other more progressive offices, nothing, no huge shocker. There was Saul Levin, who works for Cory Bush, Aria Kovolovich and Emma Preston, who work for Ro Khanna, Philip Bennett, who works for Ilhan Omar, Courtney Coble works for Jamie Raskin, Rajiv Sikora, who works for Jamal Bowman. And then there was another, I think 10 or so staffers in there who did not get arrested. Do you guys have an idea of, because Joe Manchin, he doesn't seem to be paying any type of price. I don't know that there is a price that can be exacted, at least from, bottom up, based upon what's happening with his polling in West Virginia. But what do you guys, when you guys talk about that, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to first acknowledge like how crazy it is that we're talking about congressional staffers getting arrested in Chuck Schumer's office. Like how desperate a moment it has to be for them to do that. Like that is an entirely unprecedented thing for, staff in Congress to do. The policy has always been like, don't be seen, don't be heard, press ink, staff ink stinks. And here we are, like we're building on that momentum, and it is really a dire moment. And so there is a lot of direct talk about, influencing those key leaders. And there are things that like, Biden could declare a climate emergency tomorrow. Right now, he could click of a pen, a basic thing he could be doing. But Manchin is really tough. A lot of the folks who are involved in this coalition were also involved in blockading his coal plant in West Virginia. A lot of fantastic.
We had the West Virginia Rising folks on, I think, at that time back in April. It was Warren Hillsboss.
Warren Hillsboss, yeah.
And yeah, I mean that the West Virginia Rising is part of our coalition. So I mean, I think a large part of it is recognizing that like, just yelling at Manchin has not been successful. We need our leaders, our Schumer, to put the pressure on him to use all the levers of power that he has to impact Manchin and get a deal done. Because, we've seen this bungled time and time again. We just need climate to be recognized as like this overarching priority that's going to affect all of our lives. And that just needs to happen. And so our demands align pretty closely with that of like the congressional staffers who did that sit-in. And it is just really just sort of a cry out for like, you cannot abandon this because our lives and our futures depend on it.
Can I ask how old you are, Vincent?
I am 19.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, and so just talk a little bit about the anxiety that you feel. And I'm how old am I? I'm 28. I feel, I'm starting to think like, do I want to have kids? I think I do, but do I want to bring them into this world? And I get a lot of anxiety, and I think that's distinct from there are of course generations that feel that, but when I see these heat waves and I see the planet burning, it really does give me pause. So, I mean, what does it feel like to be a part of this activism in terms of just, your future and seeing it play out this way?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit on a really key point there, which is like just like the sort of abject fear that a lot of us in our generation feel, and like why so many people of my age are willing to take action like this. Because I really, it is hard thinking about. I've always been somebody who has wanted kids one day, but like it does make you think and reconsider those things when you see headlines like that, when you see like over 1,000 people dying from heat waves in a week, or when you see people in Queens dying in their basement apartments from floods. Um, I mean, these devastating effects of extreme weather. And I mean, we are just at the start. Like these are like the early waves of the effects of the climate crisis. And it is frightening to imagine how bad it's going to get if we continue this path of inaction and burning futures for profit, which is what our leaders are doing. So it does keep me up at night sometimes, and it does cause me a lot of anxiety. It's almost like that you have to maintain this weird sort of parallel of like doing this activism, knowing how important it is to fight for solutions to the climate crisis to avoid these horrible outcomes, but also trying to like read a book or do some homework about like being consumed by like this sort of overarching anxiety and stress. I mean, we're seeing for the first time like psychiatrists and therapists getting trained in climate anxiety. And I mean, what a searing indictment of our leaders that like we have to have mental health professionals talking to folks about the fear and the anxiety they feel about an entirely avoidable crisis. And that's like, I think that's like not even just upsetting, but the most angering part of it for me and many other young people is just like, there's just no reason for us to have to feel this way, to have to go through this, to have to suffer in literal and metaphorical ways in this, because it's all avoidable and it's all the result of the greed of our leaders and the fossil fuel industry.
So let's talk about what you guys plan to do during this baseball game, to the extent that you can tell us, and also, like, can listeners participate if they're going to be in the area, or I mean, what? So give us the deets on that, to the extent that, I mean, obviously, you don't want to communicate fully what you guys are ultimately planning to do. They must know, obviously, that there's some type of protest being planned there. So what can you tell us?
Yeah, so they do know. The Capitol Police has put out a statement basically saying that they're intending on protecting First Amendment activity, but will not tolerate illegal activity, standard stuff. So we are planning to disrupt the game in a significant way. And we plan on shutting down business as usual at the game. I know those are very broad stroke terms, but we are trying to keep our precise plans close to the chest just to make sure that they are safe and executed properly. There are a large number of folks who plan on risking arrest in this action and putting their bodies on the line to shut down business as usual at the game. It is expressly nonviolent. This is a nonviolent direct action, which is a thing I try to just hammer in to make sure folks know. And that is pretty much like the extent of what I can disclose now about our precise plans. But it's going to be splashy. It's going to be a lot of great visuals that really show how desperate things are. And yeah, a huge group of folks are really going to be putting their bodies on the line to blockade things. And
now, what day is this? And I imagine people, they may not, they would have to contact you, and I would also imagine that you guys are pretty sort of like, at this point, vetting who is contacting you to find out plans is probably a part of what your organization is doing at this point. But at the very least, people could go down there and cheer on whatever happens that is not necessarily planned, or at least not necessarily plans are public. Where is it? When is it?
So it is July 28th. So it's tomorrow. And it's going to be sort of around the time of like 6 p.m. If folks want to get engaged at this point, and so far we've had over like 500 signups. We had 150 folks on a hype Zoom yesterday, or maybe 2 days ago. My days are getting scrambled. I haven't, and insane amount of emails in my inbox right now from folks who are still signing up. So you can sign up. The website is nowOrNever.earth. You can also just DM me on Twitter at Vertuccio if you need help or have questions. Especially if you're in the DC area, it's not too late. We have a training tonight at 6, and if you sign up, we can get you that information. But yeah, there are green, yellow, and red roles, which means there's like non-arrestable roles, there's a slight chance of arrest role, and there's a pretty definite arrestable role. So, you know, if folks come super late, there's definitely always still that green option, which is going to basically be like a rally. And we're happy to have folks who want this to be as big as possible.
All right, we'll put all those links in the podcast and YouTube description. But Vincent, I got to ask you, 19 years old, how long have you been doing this? How did you get into this the situation? How can I get my kids to join you?
So I think that I first started like engaging in politics in like a superficial way in like 7th or 8th grade, like vaguely following the 2016 election. And I got like, when I entered high school, I got sort of more engaged in like the electoral side of things, kind of upset about what I was seeing. And then as I sort of learned more and more, I got more and more angry about what was being done to, you know, people and the sort of like how our society treats folks and how our leaders respond to the people that they're supposed to be governing. And yeah, it's only accelerated in recent years. Like I've gotten a lot of clarity on like how urgent the climate crisis in particular is. And I've gotten pretty involved in stuff going to school here in DC. But I mean, I think in terms of getting your kids involved, I think just like day-to-day life in the United States of America in 2022 is enough to radicalize anybody.
Fair enough. Really impressive, and wish you guys a lot of luck tomorrow on the field, off the field, around the field, whatever's happening. But it should be exciting, and hopefully we'll get their attention, and keep up the good work. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break and head into the fun half of the program.
Can I just go run down and get a coffee? I'll be back up in like 5 minutes.
Sure. It's not a bit.
It's not a bit. I'm going to go now.
Watch out, Stephen Crowder. I was going to down to your change my mind thing. No, that would be great though. Yeah, Emma's just going to get a cup of coffee. Yeah, she's got to go to JFK to get the coffee and get the flight. And so we'll be back. We will be back in just a moment with the fun half. Just a reminder, it is your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member by going to jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you not only get the show free of commercials. We'll keep in that little community, the thing that's happening in Brooklyn but you get the show free of commercials. You also get the fun half of the program, both video and audio. You can get the app at majorityapp.com, totally free. And you can help this show survive and thrive. Also, don't forget justcoffee.coop. Fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority. You get 10% off. Got a bunch of emails lately of people who tried out new blends at Just Coffee. I guess it was, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago we had that big, they had the big MR25 sale. So people have gotten, they found blends that they like. They've found blends that they're trying. And of course, everybody loves the Majority Report blend because why wouldn't you? Of course you would. Matt, what's happening in the Matt Leckian media universe?
Yeah, I'm excited for our show tonight. We have Matt Christman of Chapo Trap House and Hell of Presidents on to talk about Biden, the post-Bernie left, and also I'm going to have him respond to Jordan Peterson's idea that young men particularly face such a weight of guilt when they face up to history, and how Matt Christman how Matt Christman somehow manages to do an entire podcast about the history of the presidency without succumbing to just the weight of guilt. So we're going to model what Jordan Peterson.
He's an outlier.
Yeah, exactly. He is a little bit of an outlier, but I think more people should be like Matt Christman.
Have you seen his room? It's dirty.
I just think, like, the Atlantic always does these things like, maybe we should be listening to Jordan Peterson a little bit closer. What is he speaking to? Like, from my perspective, you're leading
that's the
everybody.
Same thing that Taibbi's going to write about Alex Jones,
and it's like
it's unbelievable how they sort of. It's not the horseshoe theory, right? It's just sort of like it's just like the sort of, I don't know, weird concentric circles theory.
And like you're funneling people to just like insane like media charlatans.
It's
like, instead of people like Matt Christman who are genuinely passionate about history and can show you how to like existentially.
But history is
situate
going
yourself.
to make you feel
a
little bit less than, and that's not right.
It might if you are dependent on sort of like George Washington cherry tree mythologies, but if you actually want to face up to history,
When
Matt
people
Christman's gonna
find
model
out that's not true about the cherry tree, they get despondent.
it. They do school shootings.
That's the problem. And it's very depressing to find out that there was a time where you would own your woman, literally.
And that time is gone.
And now you can't. You make young people feel the loss, the longing.
Are you crying?
To own, yes.
It is like
crying.
Peterson.
I didn't want my wife to get a credit card in her name. There was a time where that was just taken care of. I wouldn't even have to exert an effort about it.
Kids, when they reach a certain age, they get sort of depressed about wanting to live in a fantasy world like Harry Potter or Pokemon or.
That's also been very difficult for me.
For conservatives, it's just like they wish they lived in the 40s.
But look at my suit. Of course, that's true. That's why I dress this way, as a way of fooling the females in my home. That they're my property. They're my chattel. All right, we're heading into the fun half of the program, folks. 646-257-3920. 646-257-3920. We just got an IM, New Wave Libertarian Communist. Hey, MR, I know you said you're behind on your emails. Libertarian Larry Sharp told me his team sent you an email a few days ago trying to set up a debate. Let's get on that. All right. See you in the fun half.
3 months from now, 6 months from now, 9 months from now. And I don't think it's going to be the same as it looks like in 6 months from now. And I don't know if it's necessarily going to be better 6 months from now than it is 3 months from now. But I think around 18 months out, we're going to look back and go like, wow.
What? What is that going on?
It's nuts.
Wait a second. Hold on for a second.
The Majority Report.
Emma, welcome to the program.
Hey.
Matt.
What is up, everyone?
Nomiki.
You did it. Let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon.
Bradley, you want to say hello?
Sorry to disappoint everyone. I'm just a random guy.
It's all the boys today.
Fundamentally false.
No, I'm sorry. Women's.
Stop talking for a second. Now let me finish.
Where is this coming from, dude?
But dude, you want to smoke this 7A?
Yes.
Hi, me? This me?
Yes.
Is this me?
Is it me?
It is you.
Is this me? Hello, is this me?
I think it is you. Who is you? No sound. Every single frickin' day. What's on your mind?
Sports. We can discuss free markets and we can discuss capitalism.
I'm gonna go start watching.
Libertarians.
They're so stupid, though.
Common sense says, of course.
Gobbledygook.
We fucking nailed him.
So what's 79 plus 21?
Challenge Matt.
I'm positively quivering. I believe 96, I want to say.
857-210-501. 1/2. 3/8.
9/11, for instance.
$3,400, $1,900.
6, 5, 4, $3 trillion sold. It's a zero-sum game.
Actually, you're making me think less of it.
But let me say this. Poop.
Call it satire. Sam goes to satire.
On top of it all, my favorite part about you is just like every day, all day, like everything you do.
Without a doubt. Hey, buddy, we see you. All right, folks.
the weak being weeded out, obviously.
Yeah, sun's out, guns out. I don't know.
But you should know.
People just don't like to entertain ideas anymore.
I have a question. Who cares?
Our chat is enabled, folks.
I love it.
I do love that.
Look, gotta jump. Gotta be quick. I gotta jump.
I'm losing it, bro.
2 o'clock. We're already late, and the guy's being a dick. So screw him. Sent to a gulag?
Outrageous.
Like, what is wrong with you?
Love you, bye.
Love you. Bye-bye. Indie Pedal